How could I have known that the young man who helped me set up my coffee maker would unknowingly change my life forever? That morning felt so ordinary, just another day in my quiet, lonely routine. But when I met Jake, everything shifted in a way I never could have anticipated. Let me start from the beginning. I'm 60 years old, divorced for 15 years, and I live alone. It's a quiet life, and over the years, I've developed my own habits, comforts, and little routines to fill the silence. My living room reflected that solitude, personal items and keepsakes scattered about. Things I'd long stopped noticing. That day, I decided to finally replace my broken coffee maker. At the store, a young employee named Jake enthusiastically offered to help carry it to my car. He was polite, energetic, and brimming with a kind of warmth I hadn't encountered in ages. When I got home, the thought of struggling to set up the machine on my own felt daunting. Without much thought, I called the store, and Jake offered to swing by after his shift to help out. I didn't think twice about it, just a kind young man lending a hand. When he arrived, coffee maker in tow, I opened the door and let him in. That's when it hit me. I'd left a few personal items scattered across the couch, a couple of my favorite toys and some intimate clothing. I froze, realizing too late how careless I'd been. Jake noticed them almost immediately. His gaze lingered for a brief moment before he turned to me with a small, knowing smile. "You live alone, don't you?" he asked, a playful curiosity in his tone. I could feel the heat rush to my face. Embarrassment washed over me as I stammered, "Jake, please, let's just pretend you didn't see that." But instead of awkwardness, his expression softened. "Don't worry," he said, his voice gentle and reassuring. "It's natural to have these things. We all have our needs, especially when we're on our own." There was something in the way he said it, kind but deeply understanding, that disarmed me. It wasn't judgment. It was connection. He got to work setting up the coffee maker, his presence filling the house with an energy I hadn't felt in years. I found myself watching him more closely than I expected, noticing the way he moved with such ease, how his youthful enthusiasm seemed to brighten the room. Once he finished, Jake leaned against the counter and glanced over at me. "You know," he said with a slight grin, "sometimes it's not just about the coffee or even the toys. Sometimes it's about the company." His words hung in the air, their meaning unspoken but undeniable. I laughed nervously, trying to break the tension. "Well, you've certainly been good company today. How about I make us some coffee, now that it's all set up?" As I moved toward the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. My jeans and t-shirt felt suffocatingly dull. On impulse, I decided to change into something a bit more comfortable. Upstairs, I slipped into a sleek, figure-hugging spaghetti strap dress. It was simple but flattering, something I hadn't worn in years. I touched up my makeup slightly, smoothing my hair before heading back downstairs. When I re-entered the living room, Jake's eyes immediately found mine. For a moment, his gaze lingered, his surprise evident. I pretended not to notice, walking past him toward the coffee machine. "So, Jake," I began playfully, "are you single? Got a girlfriend? Or do you spend your nights alone like me?" He hesitated, his cheeks tinged with a faint blush. "No girlfriend," he said, meeting my eyes. "And yeah, I'm alone most nights." There was a vulnerability in his voice that matched the feeling building inside me. I moved closer, pulling a chair next to his. As I sat, my skirt inched up slightly, and I noticed his eyes flickered downward for just a second, before quickly returning to mine. "Well," I said, crossing my legs casually, "if you're going to help a woman set up her coffee maker, you might as well stay for the coffee." Jake chuckled, relaxing into his seat. The tension between us was palpable, an unspoken connection simmering just below the surface. After a pause, he looked at me, his expression earnest. "How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?" I smiled. 60, I replied. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. I would have guessed maybe 50. The compliment caught me off guard, and I couldn't help but laugh. "Well, Do you like 50-year-olds better? I teased, raising an eyebrow. Jake shook his head, a grin spreading across his face. I like you just the way you are, he said simply. The honesty in his words stirred something inside me. For so long, I'd been closed off, resigned to my solitude. But in that moment, with this young man sitting across from me, I felt something spark, something unexpected and undeniably real. As we sat there, sipping coffee and trading stories, I realized that the loneliness I'd grown so accustomed to was beginning to fade. And it all started with a broken coffee maker and a stranger who turned out to be anything but ordinary. Each word, each moment shared between us seemed to draw us closer. There was an undeniable warmth in the air, fueled by the electricity of being in the same room together. I caught the look in Jake's eyes, surprise, admiration, and something deeper I couldn't quite name. No, that's not what I meant, he said, his voice tinged with shyness. You look so young and beautiful. His words echoed in my mind, sending a rush of warmth through me. But alongside that warmth, a flicker of unease crept in. Being this close now, standing on the precipice of something new, made me hesitate. I took a deep breath and asked the question burning in my chest. Do you have a girlfriend? Are you alone? How do you spend your nights? Jake's eyes locked onto mine, his voice low and steady as he answered, I'm alone. In that moment, I believed him. But it wasn't the kind of loneliness he wanted. It was the kind of solitude that pressed against your chest. A longing for something, someone you couldn't quite name. We stared at each other in silence, the intensity of my gaze reflected back in his. Something shifted within me, and suddenly I knew I had to act. That's not how tonight's going to go, I said, my voice firm, carrying a weight I hadn't planned. I motioned toward the room with the bed and turned, certain he would follow. I heard his hesitant footsteps behind me, each one quicker than the last. When we reached the bedroom, he stopped near the door, his shoulders tense but his expression unwavering. Jake, I said, softer now but with the same resolve. Are you ready? His hesitation was brief, and as he stepped closer, I slid the straps of my dress off my shoulders. The fabric fell to the floor, brushing against my skin. I felt his eyes on me, full of awe, curiosity, and something new. I moved closer, letting the silence between us speak volumes. When my fingertips touched his cheek, he leaned toward me, his breath hitching slightly. His hands found their way to my waist as his lips finally met mine. His kiss was tentative at first, carrying the rawness of inexperience. But that innocence only drew me in further. Slowly, I pulled back and moved to the bed, sinking onto it deliberately, my movements unhurried. Jake, I beckoned softly, patting the space beside me. Come here. There's nothing to be afraid of. He approached, careful and unsure. But when he lay beside me, the tension began to ease. I turned toward him, my hand resting lightly on his chest. Have you ever thought about this moment? Imagined it? I asked, my voice a whisper. Jake's gaze didn't falter. More than imagined it. I never thought it could actually happen. I smiled, brushing my lips against his forehead. Sometimes, life is better when you don't overthink. Just feel the moment. Don't stop. The hesitation in his touch faded as he slid his hand from my waist upward, pulling me closer. The space between us disappeared, and the connection we shared felt deeper than just the physical. Later, as we lay side by side, his strong arms wrapped around me, I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Brittany, he began, his voice soft, this feeling I have right now. I've never felt so calm, so at peace. His words warmed me, and without looking up, I murmured, Really? Yeah, he said, his hand tracing gentle patterns on my back. All my life, I've been chasing something. I never thought I'd stop long enough to enjoy a moment like this. But now, being here with you, it feels like everything has been leading to this.